And thank you, Steve and Rod, for inviting me to talk about popcorn today. I was having a conversation with my esteemed friend and colleague, Tom Hogemeyer, during the break about how we really get at improving health in the US and around the world by changing our diet. And there are so many things we can do. Obviously, we eat a lot of wheat, and none of us eat enough fiber, probably. So obviously, this is a low-hanging fruit, and we need to go after the low-hanging fruit. But there are lots of things we can do in terms of biofortification and breeding, but also changing the amount of things we eat and the proportion of things that we eat. So I'm going to talk about a fortified version of popcorn, and we can change. We all know that. So eating more plant proteins. I hate the term plant-based proteins, because it suggests that that's something new. But it's not only more healthy for us; it's more sustainable in terms of agriculture going forward. So this project touches on the biofortification side, but it also is a kind of nod to let's eat more plant protein. So I'm not going to talk about much science on this. People have seen the long version of this talk, so hopefully the 10-minute version is going to be a lot more palatable and digestible for those people. But I do need to just introduce very quickly what quality protein maize is. Okay, so quality protein maize is a version of corn that has high lysine. Okay, and the way it does this, it was originally developed from this mutant, naturally occurring mutant called opaque-2 back in the 1960s. And then breeders at Simmet got hold of that and bred back. So that had a very soft, chalky endosperm. You've heard the term endosperm a lot today. But they bred back in that kernel hardness just with simple biochemical tests and selection. And so a lot of my research over the years has been to understand this process of what allows the modified version of opaque-2 to have this vitreous or hard endosperm, which is really an important trait in corn. And so on this slide, I'm also showing that this quality protein maize alongside a normal popcorn kernel. And one thing you'll notice is that they both have this very glassy texture. And that is important in QPM dent corn. It's also a very important trait in popcorn. That glassiness is the thing which allows popcorn to actually pop. And just from a pure instinct perspective, when I started this project a little over 10 years ago, it gave me a lot of confidence this was actually going to work, because popcorn needs that glassiness. So the difference between normal dent corn and quality protein maize, be it the unmodified or the modified version, is basically a recalibration of the protein in that kernel. And so normally kernels have a lot of these CN proteins. That's what gives the kernel its hardness. But the disadvantage of those CN proteins is that they're deficient in two essential amino acids, namely lysine and tryptophan. You heard lysine mentioned in the previous talk. So, So through this rebalancing that happens in opaque-2 and quality protein maize, you have much lower amounts of these zein storage proteins, but much higher amounts of all the other proteins in the kernel. And those other proteins are what contain those increased levels of those essential amino acids that are normally deficient in maize and every other cereal, okay, which accumulates these prolamine storage proteins. Okay, so you can see here that in opaque-2 and quality protein maize, they have double the level of these essential amino acids, which essentially makes those varieties a complete protein source. You can feed monogastric livestock or weaning infants on this type of maize alone and no other protein source, and they're not protein deficient, okay? So quality protein maize in the dent corn version has been used in many countries over the last almost half century, and it's made a great deal of positive difference in their nutrition. But this has a much bigger potential around the world to contribute to our pushed to be consuming more plant-based protein. Okay, so quality protein popcorn. So around, just as I said, a little over 10 years ago, Conagra Foods came to UNL and they brought their entire popcorn breeding program to UNL. And so my involvement with that was to propose to make a high lysine version of popcorn. Okay, so is this even possible? And when I agreed to start this project, I didn't know that it was going to work at all. But you know, popcorn in its native state is a great snack food. Okay, it's high fiber. It's a high fiber and high protein snack. It can become a very unhealthy food if you cover it in salt and bad fats. But in its native form, it's actually a very healthy snack. Okay, and it has, what we've discovered in this project is that it has extensive natural variability for flavor, color, and texture. Okay, and that's been really neglected in commercial popcorn. If you try to eat like First Act or Orville without any of that salt and fat on it, it's basically inedible, but it doesn't have to be that way. So can we incorporate some of that natural diversity for taste and texture into these varieties and cut down on the amount of additives which make popcorn an unhealthy snack? So quality protein popcorn is a superfood basically, and it fits into all of these categories of healthy foods: naturally healthy, fortified, better for you, organic, food intolerant. So it checks all of those boxes. And you know, and also the rise in ready to eat popcorn has been, you know, that has been increasing share of the market over the last 10, 20 years or so. It's also ideal for organic production and has a huge export potential. So it does not necessarily need to be just a snack food. This can actually make a meaningful contribution to the diets of people who rely more on cereals as their staple food. Okay, so over the last decade or so, we've had a number of high impact publications, starting with the proof of concept that we could actually make inbred opaque, modified opaque 2 popcorn, which popped and had that high lysine phenotype. And then we started making hybrids with those inbreds we'd made, testing those hybrids, and then narrowing down to a very small number of those hybrids. And then here comes the serendipity. So when we do science, we have unexpected positive and negative effects that we didn't plan. And one of those was we did a scientific taste testing panel, Colby Community College, and we discovered that a lot of these finished lines actually were preferable to the commercial hybrid, the equivalent commercial hybrids from Conagra in their native form with no salt and sugar and other things added, okay? And a lot of diversity. I'm not going to show you those data, but we had some really high scoring lines, and you can really tell the difference in their taste and texture. So we're really excited about that. And then even more unexpected, we collaborated with Dr. Benson and his graduate student, Nate Court, and did some microbiome studies. And really, this was an amazing surprise that a lot of our QPP lines actually have a positive effect on certain beneficial gut bacteria in the human microbiome. So, and actually that was not intended originally, but that might actually be one of the things that, you know, if you can make a superfood and it has lots of different strings to its bow, then it's actually a lot more likely to be adoptable. So I'm not going to show you much data, but the conclusions are the hybrids that we developed show comparable yields to the original, to the comparable Conagra hybrids. Very slightly reduced expansion, but not a deal breaker. Not something that you'd notice with by just looking at them. They have a complete protein profile, positive consumer preference in taste and texture, and positive effects on the microbiome. Just a little bit, just demonstrating the lysine increase. Okay, when you measure any amino acids, you have to consider the free amino acids and the protein-bound amino acids. protein-bound lysine makes the major contribution. It's about 10 times more than free lysine. And we show about a twofold increase in our quality protein maize hybrids, popcorn hybrids in the protein-bound form, and about a 5 to 10-fold increase in the free lysine form. So both contribute to that overall increased lysine. This was just a fun aerial shot from Craig Chandler. He always comes to visit me in the summer with his drone, and this is a picture of our initial hybrid plot where we were testing 40 different hybrids that we made. You might be thinking, okay, so you measured the lysine in popcorn. Obviously, we don't eat raw popcorn in its raw grain form. We cook it, and there are lots of different ways that we can prepare popcorn. So obviously, we did these tests in the raw form, and we did them in the various popped forms. And you can do air popping, where you add no fat at all. You can do microwave popping, and you can do oil popping, and they all have different effects on the degradation of this lysine. So I just want to point out from this slide, yes, all of these forms have a detrimental effect on the lysine content. Air popping, the one where you're not adding any fat, is the least destructive. But if you look at our QPP hybrids, even in the popped form, they have more lysine than in the raw form in the native popcorn hybrids. So it's still up there in terms of that complete protein profile. Yeah, so this is just an image. Whoops. This is just an image of what the inbreds look like. So on this image, you have inbreds on either side and the hybrid in the middle. And so what this showed was that, yes, we have hybrid vigor in terms of popcorn popping size, but not only that, diversity. So the hybrid doesn't even necessarily look like either of the parents in terms of the flake size or the morphology. So you may know you have mushroom popcorn and butterfly popcorn, and they have different applications in the popcorn industry. So there's a lot of variability there. And like I said, a huge variation in the variety of flavors and aromas. This is just, I hesitated to put this in, but I left it in there because it's better than just showing a bullet point. But these are the main beneficial bacteria that Dr. Benson's group showed were increased. So these are both regarded as positive microbes. Butyrate is a metabolite that is associated with a good, healthy microbiome, and they also remeasured the lysine in these popped flakes to confirm what we had already shown. So that was all funded by ConAgra, and we're still in the process of negotiating how they're going to actually incorporate these into real world agriculture. But and there's some issues with who owns this. But in the meantime, we've started this project again with all public lines, and we're also incorporating color into this project. So there are various colored popcorns, which include, that's for a novelty, and it also has a nutritional aspect as well, obviously. And we're also doing this in sweet corn. So sweet corn is obviously the version of corn that's consumed in its vegetable form, has a surprisingly high amount of protein. So since it's already accumulating zeins at the prime eating stage, we can apply that proteome rebalancing principle even in sweet corn, even though it's consumed at 20 days after pollination. There's enough zein accumulation by that stage that we can have that proteome rebalancing. And so this project is fairly advanced. We're already making hybrids of these high lysine sweet corns, and they taste good. They have, again, different, lots of diversity in taste and texture. And then finally, we're also doing colored sweet corn, which we'll also combine with the high lysine trait, okay? So color is fun. It's good to look at. It changes the taste. It changes the texture. And also micronutrients, okay? What makes up color in corn is basically a combination of carotenoid pigments and anthocyanins. So in the carotenoids, you have beta carotene, which is precursor to vitamin B. So anytime you're showing these orange and yellow pigments, that indicates high levels of carotenoids, beta carotene. And then we have the reds and the purples, which is that anthocyanin, which is also a very powerful antioxidant. The good thing about sweet corn is that you don't have to cook it so much, so you have less destruction of these micronutrients before you get to eat it. And by the way, these taste really good raw. We do a lot of tasting in the field and they're pretty good. So I hesitate to show this slide because I just realized that I didn't include Dr. Benson and his student who did all the microbiome stuff, but these are the people who did this work. Thank you.